Brinkley, settle down.
There is an eternal and compelling curiosity about war, about wars in which our own survival is at stake, and wars long past. The real explosion of professional coverage came with the U.S. Civil War. As in all things, America went in for mass production. Newspapers in the South still relied heavily on telegrams and letters from serving officers, but at least 500 reporters covered the war for the North. Because Vietnam was the most accessible war in American history for reporters, the press had never before had such complete assistance in covering any other military conflict. Until 1965, America continued to insist that its role in Vietnam was purely advisory. To have restricted the press or imposed censorship of any kind would have signaled that the Army of South Vietnam was receiving something far more serious than advice. The press identification issued by the Military Affairs Command of Vietnam entitled the bearer access to the Army's ground and air transportation system throughout the entire country. In addition to the general media, there was a group of soldiers who went into battle with a pen and camera. The Snuffies were a group of Marine war correspondents who saw it all and reported on it. They are a breed apart, and the portrayal of Private Joker in Full Metal Jacket was not far from the truth. One of them, Captain Dale Dye, continues to do so in films such as Platoon, Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, and Casualties of War. This is their story. Like all Marines coming to Vietnam, the Snuffies had to be processed at the replacement depot.
Next morning, they called the people up and they started giving you names. This is the unit you're going to, see Corporal so-and-so, see Sergeant so-and-so. This is the unit you're going to. And I went through all this, and later I found out they were all going to ground pounder units. They were going to 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. They were grunts. And some of them they had other MSs like Remington Raiders, the regular Marine Corps company kind of structure.
Finally, they got to Berntson, who gets what he thought was a lucky number.
Finally, they get to me and they say, "You're 4312. Okay, yeah, you're. What is that?" It's a combat correspondent. I said, "Well, you're supposed to go to Da Nang. You got to go down the road here to Da Nang Division rear." I'm thinking, well, this is okay. I'm going to be in a rear end. This will be a rear division. In the rear, that means I don't have to go anywhere.
Less than a day in country, Berntson is told to grab his bag and stick out his thumb.
And they said, "We don't have a truck for you, but you just go down there and you get on the road and hitchhike and tell them you want to take them up to 1st Marine compound." That's how I came in country. About noon that day, I dragged my sea bag, which I couldn't even carry at that point, up this hill to a little hot Quonset hut and checked in to a little organization that had a little bumbling sign on the handwritten sign said, "Informational Services Office." First to go, last to know.
Berntson's good life in the rear would end all too soon.
Normally when you came in country, in the ISO, Top Wilson, great guy, Top, would always try to give you 10 days to acclimate. you know, and that was for the first day, 10 days, you know, you learned how to take copy down to the 3rd MAF CIB Center, which was Combat Center, and you got a little lay of the land. You'd take a drive, and you know, sometimes he'd take the new guy and he'd drive him out to some of the safer roads and show him, you know, okay, now this is how you get to the 7th Marines, this is how you get to the 5th Marines, this is how you get to the 1st Marines. And so anyway, I was in country, but unfortunately, about my 5th day, things had gone real bad. There'd been a big operation earlier. It was called Union 1, and it was down south in the Tam Khe Chulai area, and the 5th Marines. And down there, they fought the regular NVA.
Union 1 was not your usual shoot and scoot with Charlie.
Up in the Da Nang area, we fought occasionally in NVA, but we fought mostly BC. BC battalions, well, but not NVA regulars. Union 1 was a bad one. You know, the battle was extensive. The battle tactics, the NVA had us. They got a battalion cut, trapped. And so it was a good-sized battle. It was just about over when another unit of Marines got into trouble. A helicopter went down, and they sent a company out to do perimeter around the helicopter, and the NVA ambushed them. So Union 2 began right there. Well, Top did not have any other guys. Gordon had been hit on Union 1. There were no new guys. Like I said, I was the only new guy. Everybody else was deployed. And he said, I really hate to do this, but I need to send you to the field. He said, this has got to be the time I send you to the field. He said, I'm going to send you with the best man I got. And he said, you know, Sergeant Bill Christofferson. Now, Bill has been here, you know, for, I think at that time he'd been there 10, 11 months, shortly before his first tour was up. He said, Bill is a cautious guy, but he's the best guy to learn from. He said, you know, Bill is, you know, he'll take you out there and he'll get you back. So pay very close attention to what Bill does.
For the most part, what we did was to go out on combat operations with units who were going out. Usually we'd go out with a photographer, sometimes with a couple, sometimes with a still photographer and a movie photographer. And basically just hook up with the unit, usually at the beginning of an operation. Sometimes it would already be in progress and you'd have to find your way out there. Maybe get a little bit of a briefing from somebody about what the plan was and what the operation was all about. Maybe not.
Usually, there were no set assignments. The Snuffies picked who they would travel with and who they would cover.
You sort of get to choose which company or platoon you wanted to go with and then go introduce yourself there and kind of eventually hook up with a squad and become an extra person, really. I mean, there wasn't like, you know, reporting job to do during the day. You did what everybody else did, which was walk around in the sun and wait till you got ambushed or something. The difference being that you know, eventually, after there was some action or there was enough, you'd been there enough that you thought you had some stories to write, you could get on a resupply chopper or something and work your way back to division headquarters and spend a day or two writing those stories and then see where they wanted you to go next.
Being a war correspondent did not mean you were not a Marine.
So it was, at the same time, you know, you were a Marine. You're armed like everybody else. You were carrying the same gear as everybody else. And if you wanted to be accepted out there, you did everything else they did. You stood your watch in the middle of the night, and you pitched in on whatever it was that anybody was doing, and you maybe went along on patrols, and you did, you know, whatever was expected of everybody else.
The Snuffies shared everything with grunts, including the danger.
When I get together with people I was there with in ISO, other correspondents, I'm one of the few that came back without a Purple Heart. I don't know, I would say the people I was there with, it must be 75 or 80% were wounded at least once, some of them pretty seriously. I tell them, you know, the idea was like not to get wounded. That was, Purple Hearts aren't anything to brag about. That, you know, actually it's sort of like means you screwed up if you got one. But now everybody who had that job ultimately would end up in a real combat situation. It was inevitable, because if you were in the field as much as we were.
Christofferson may not have gotten a Purple Heart, but he certainly came close during Operation Union 2.
But, you know, an example, I guess, that I went in with a unit from the 5th Marines on the first day of Operation Union 2, where we ended up in a hot landing zone and under fire and basically pinned down in a paddy for quite an extended period of time. They also shot down a helicopter, and so we had that as an added target. We got mortared. You know, all of the things that happened to us probably in the first couple of hours. We'd never gotten out of the landing zone, basically. And so I'm along as a correspondent. You know, I'm behind a paddy dike like everybody else, and we're in a situation where a Marine had gone up over the top and had gotten hit maybe 25 yards in front of us by a sniper. Someone else had gone in to get him, and that person also had been shot, presumably killed. So there are 2 bodies lying there.
Christofferson was asked to stop being a reporter and do what Marines always do, come to the aid of a fallen buddy.
A lieutenant who's next to me behind this dike looks at me and says, "Who are you?" I said, "ISO, sir." He said, "You want to help?" I said, "Well, of course. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, somebody's got to go in and get those guys. We aren't going to leave them here." And so he called one of his other people. You know, we went in and they laid down some covering fire for us, and we went in and got one of those guys out. A couple other people went in and got the second one. You know, it wasn't like it was a heroic deed or anything. It was part of the job, but it made you realize that you were in the Marine Corps, that you weren't just along for the ride.
It was funny. It was established tradition, but it wasn't written anywhere, and it was certainly not in compliance with Marine Corps regs. But we operated up there with a caste system. We had an officer, and sometimes an assistant officer, but never more than 2. 2 officers. We were TO'd 2 officers. We had a bunch of staff, NCOs, from a master gunnery sergeant, gunny sergeant, and a lot of staff sergeant, E6s. And in the Marine Corps, that's a breaking point, as you well may know. Anything from an E6 staff sergeant and above, well, that's a different, you're moving to a different rank, you know. Then from then on, it's sergeant and corporal, which are NCOs, and then you go down to the animals, which is 1, 2, 3 side, you know. It was a strange structure, but the thing of it was, which, you know, was nobody that was a staff sergeant and above, with few rare exceptions, went to the field. Only sergeants and below job was to go out and be on these combat operations and spend all the time in the field and come back with stories. Henceforth, we developed the name Snuffies. We were really easy to snuff out.
The Snuffies became the base camp outcasts. That fact put them in harm's way.
And our reputation as being just a little irreverent had earned us Hooch 13, which was a strong back hooch that was at the absolute first line wire right at the beginning of the rice paddy, that if ever the NVA had decided and forced to come through, we were at the channel point. I mean, they would have come right through there. And it was also, that was where the creek, which drained all the, how do you say it politely, all the urinal tubes up the hill, drained into this creek and then ran past our place. So we used to say that we had a cold water flat with running warm water.
Okay, the hooch basically, it was elevated with like 4x4s. It had a plywood floor. It had wood framing to which they nailed screen all the way around. And then it had a metal roof, like a sheet metal roof. And I don't know how this happened, but we divided this up. We got some wood, like plywood, so each had like a little living area, piece of plywood on each side. And you had a cot, and you had a locker box, and probably a duffel bag. And then on these plywood walls, you had all kinds of shit nailed up. Pictures. I had this California flag that I got, and that was there, and people signed it and all that. Pictures of girlfriends, Playboy pinups, and all. A lot of places to hang stuff, just paraphernalia. And your military gear was in there, and that was the hooch. And then in Hooch 13, one of these living areas had been converted into a bar. In fact, I think it took a couple of them. We just got rid of them and sectioned it off and built a nice bar, the Combat Correspondents Club, we called it. And that's where that was the focal point of our social lives. We had one little thing that was kind of interesting, and that's when, for about the first 6 months or so of '67, there was very little activity in Da Nang as far as taking incoming rounds and stuff like that. Then the rockets started coming in. And the air base got rocketed fairly regularly.
For the Snuffies, the rocket attacks became a source of entertainment.
Well, we were on the side of a hill, and you could see the air base from that hillside. And one of the things we would do whenever the rockets started coming in at night, and we were in the area, we would go in, and the hooch had a metal roof. And you were able to step from the hillside onto the roof. Because they had cut this pad out with bulldozers where they put the hooches. And we would get beach chairs and go sit on the roof drinking beer and watching the rockets. It was a surrealistic scene.
There was only one rule during the nightly shows.
And the one rule was if you got on the roof you couldn't be wearing clothes. So you'd be sitting up there on this roof with about 12 naked guys drinking beer in a beach chair watching these rockets, the fireworks show down at Da Nang. And just, you think back on that, you couldn't even write that this was happening. No one would believe it. But this is absolute God's truth. This was going on there.
Well, when we weren't in the bush, we were relative lunatics, I suppose. I think our commanding officer said to me once that I'm either decorating you or court-martialing you. And I said, yes, sir, I guess that's about true. And we did engage in some atrocious behavior. And when I say atrocious, it was fun. It was wildness. We were all teenagers, and we wanted to live life to its fullest because we had that knowledge, I think inherently, that we might not live it very much longer. We were going to have to go. No question. There was no excuse. There was no way to get out of it. We were going to have to go, or end up in jail or court-martialed, and we wanted to go. But that led us, I think, to some aberrant lunatic behavior.
Nothing can prepare a young soldier for the reality of being in a combat zone.
It's hard to describe it if you haven't been there. It's sort of how I felt about boot camp in a way. I mean, before I went, everybody who I knew who had ever been in the Marine Corps tried to tell me everything imaginable about how bad boot camp would be. And so I thought I was kind of mentally prepared for it. And when I got there, it was 100 times worse than anything I ever could have imagined. And there was no way until you've experienced it that you can imagine what it was like. And I don't mean to compare boot camp and combat, but it's the same kind of thing in that it's really hard to describe unless you've been there. But I guess it's one thing about it that struck me, I guess. I mean, it's frightening. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's not unusual, and I don't hesitate at all to admit that sometimes I was scared to death. I think everybody was. being in a situation where what happens to you is almost random. I guess if anything, my wife says, you know, you're not afraid of death. It doesn't bother you to think that you might die, you know? And I tell her it's because of Vietnam. That once you've been in a situation where it's pretty much beyond your control whether you're going to live or die, and it seems almost random, whether it's going to be you or the guy next to you or 20 meters away, or once you've been mortared, I think, where you're under a mortar attack and there's really nothing you can do. You can hear them coming. One particular day that we were in that paddy, you'd get just a few seconds warning, and people, this was like playing roulette or Russian roulette maybe, people would try to decide which side of the dike to dive on, you know, try to guess where it was going to land. That's sheer chance whether you live or die or get wounded at least. And so kind of once you get accustomed to that, you don't get exactly fatalistic or think it's destiny or something, because if you did, it would make you take dumb chances and take risks, and that's not what you learn. And what you learn is to do everything you can to take care of yourself and to protect yourself, but that it may not matter. And the other thing about it is you don't have a choice. I mean, in ISO there was a little bit of, sometimes I felt like a little bit of feeling that, especially some of us who had been there a long time or whatever, that maybe nothing bad can happen to me, and so I'm going to kind of push it a little, or I'm going to do something maybe that's a little bit foolish. I think some of the photographers were the worst, because they had to be to do their job. When there'd be contact, everybody else would want to hit the dirt. Well, they would want to head in the direction of where the action was, because that's where they were going to get the photos. Or if we were going to go a fire team at a time and then leapfrog, they'd want to go with the first one so they'd get pictures of the second ones coming over. Well, that's great. I was the reporter and we stayed together generally. They wanted, you know, among other things, the reporter was the caption writer. So you're pretty much stuck with the photographer. So they were always kind of agitating about, you know, let's be on the point, let's be, you know, where they thought they could get the best stuff. And that wasn't necessarily bravado or they were being foolhardy, that was more doing their job. But there were times, I think, when some of us got a little bit reckless and said, oh, you know, I've been on 15 operations now and nothing bad has happened to me. I guess, you know, when everybody else hits the dirt, I can stand up and run up there and see what's going on, you know.
I tell you how bad it got for myself. You know, when you hear people talk about when you start getting salty. Okay, well, I knew when I started getting salty. You know, two things. One is you could tell if there was a .30 carbine and it was far away, the ammunition was probably wet, and chances of them getting to you were pretty, you didn't need to lay down the rice paddy, you know. And if you were actually walking and you could hear the bullets, you know, zinging past, you might want to get down, but take your time. If you had a bullet that went that way, you better fall quick, because it was personal.
I probably found under one roof of one hardback hooch in Vietnam some of the most unique personalities, some of the most intelligent and interesting men I've ever run into in my life. They are, to this day, some of the most extraordinary men I've ever met. We have a unique modicum of success that we've had. We have guys who are editors on major daily newspapers. We have guys who are in show business. We have guys who've made and lost $10 million. They were unique guys. Were they rebellious? Yes. Did they fit into the standard Marine Corps mold? No. Were they dedicated, and did they believe in themselves, and did they believe in what was going on? Yes, yeah, they did. But we had a very black humor. We had a very dark look at things, I guess, and we tended to laugh at things that other people did not. We found our place in the war a very unique place, and as such we saw a whole lot of stuff during the Vietnam War that I don't think the average person did see. We got literally to take a look at it from every aspect. We could go out with armor, we could go out with artillery, we could go out with infantry, we could go out with aviation, and we did. We could go wherever we thought there was an opportunity to take a look at what U.S. Marines were doing in that war.